Welcome to CNN Talk. Theresa May's last day as leader. Just explain this, Aisha. So she steps down as leader of the Conservatives. So she's no longer leader of the Conservatives, but she remains Prime Minister.
Yes, it's a slightly odd kind of situation. Although, to be fair, she's sort of been in office but without power for quite a long time now. So she's formally stepping down. The contest to succeed her is kind of well underway, but she will still be Prime Minister of this country. David Cameron did a similar thing when he decided that he was stepping down after the result of the European referendum back in 2016. So she remains in post as Prime Minister, obviously, if there's any big disasters, but she won't be making any new policy announcements. You know, she's kind of there as a placeholder until we have our new Prime Minister, who I think will be Mr. Boris Johnson.
Well, that's the current polling, isn't it, and all the suggestion. But he could, you know, things change pretty rapidly, don't they?
Yeah, and I think particularly in the Conservative leadership, history shows you that the big beast in the run-up to the polls and the vote is often the one who doesn't make it.
Yeah.
So it could be somebody who's in the second order of MPs now that squeaks through and inherits quite a royal mess to fix.
He didn't meet Donald Trump, but he did speak to Donald Trump. Was that interesting to you, that he is, whilst he's in campaigning mode, it wouldn't necessarily be good optics to be photographed with him?
Exactly. And if anything, Boris is very much focused on his own persona, the thing he's created. So he's got to be very careful because Trump is a polarizing figure. They even say maybe Sadiq Khan is ensured his re-election because of Donald Trump's attacks. So Boris is very strategic. He's very careful. This group called Led by Donkeys has been posting on sort of signs, sayings that Boris has said about Donald Trump, which have been deeply negative. So Boris has cut his hair, kept his head down, and wants to be the leader of the Conservative Party, which he will betray if it happens.
So where is British politics heading? The question we're asking you. I mean, one part of that, obviously, is that whoever takes over from Theresa May is going to be a leaver.
Absolutely.
Has to be.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that normally you would be quite right, Andrew. Sometimes the front runner doesn't always, romp home to victory. But because we are in such unusual circumstances and because Brexit is the fault line, particularly if you remember the selectorate of the Conservative Party is 100,000 people who are absolutely obsessed about Brexit. It's not a question about ideas. It's not a question about policy. It's about how hard do you want your Brexit and how fast do you want your Brexit and how quickly do you want to leave without a deal. That is the race within the Conservative Party, and you are naive and kidding yourself if you think it's anything else. So that's why I think Boris Johnson is pretty much a shoo-in. If you look at the betting markets, they've pretty much kind of stopped taking money on him. But also the polling, it looks like Boris Johnson is the only person that could really take on Jeremy Corbyn. Now, Boris Johnson is not my cup of tea at all. I have big, big issues with the guy. However, he is popular out there in the country. He is the guy that swung the Leave vote. And remember, he has won twice in a very left-leaning city, London. So he's not my cup of tea, but he is a big enough beast to take on Jeremy Corbyn. And that is what the selectorate will be thinking.
The Labour, this by-election we had, Labour won. They argued that they campaigned away from Brexit. So people do want a different conversation than Brexit right now. But is that true, do you think, if there's an election right now? Surely it'd be defined by Brexit.
I think it's a bit self-serving. I don't doubt that it's true. I don't doubt that other people out there in the country are talking about other issues other than Brexit. But any by-election game usually turns into a game of turnout. And who knows who their vote is, who can get it out. And the Labour Party has a lot more boots on the ground and historical knowledge of that riding since they held that constituency, since 2017. And we're able to turn that vote out. Brexit Party has no machinery, no infrastructure, got 28.9% on emotion. And this sense of getting people out just through rhetoric and appearances. So in a general election, the Brexit Party will have that challenge up and down the country. Do they have the machine and the infrastructure to identify vote, get money out of it, and get it to the polls?
And also, Labour may have moved the writ a little too soon in relation to this because their vote share went down. And I think it's because of all the energy that's around the referendum and so forth. But I certainly agree with Andrew, people at the end of the day, there's tribal Labour and there is the tried and the true, and they did have the operation on the ground.
I've got a slightly different thing to take on that, but yeah, we'll come back on that.
You're teasing ahead to your performance for the show.
A bit of a...
Coming next. Welcome to CNN Talk. Theresa May has quit as leader of the party. She stays on for a while as Prime Minister until a new leader is selected. Where is British politics heading?
I believe it is absolutely right that this government is committed to delivering on the vote of the British people. Every time somebody votes against a deal, the risk of no deal increases. I want to leave the European Union with a good deal. I have done everything I can to convince MPs to back that deal. Sadly, I have not been able to do so.
Political realities are back in the spotlight in Britain today.
Prime Minister Theresa May will officially resign as leader of the Conservative Party.
She'll remain Prime Minister until a successor is chosen and in place.
That's expected the week of July 22nd.
Her resignation will trigger the race to become the next PM. As of now, 11 people have declared their candidacy.
I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
I love you, Theresa May, says Abdul Salam. You've done well for the country, but Heidi says British politics is in the toilet. Sack the lot of them. Get a new young government. Aisha, just take us through what happened today and what this means in terms of the leadership of the country.
So we've had a really interesting, I'd say 24 hours in politics. You've got the Prime Minister who has today officially resigned as leader of the Conservative Party. She's finally gone. This has been a process, to be fair, which has been going on for quite a long time. She will carry on being Prime Minister in a sort of as a placeholder. You still need to have some head of authority in terms of UK politics, but she won't be making any big policy announcements. She's there just in case to keep things ticking over and in case there is any sort of problems. Her sort of parting legacy, I mean, let's be honest, she was given a poison chalice. She was given a difficult hand to play, but she played it catastrophically badly. She will go down as probably one of the worst prime ministers in modern political history. And in a way, a sort of fitting departure symbol was last night. There was a very important historic by-election in a seat which has swung between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party for a long time. And the Conservative Party got absolutely thumped in it. The Brexit Party, which is pushing for a very, very hard and fast Brexit, leaving the EU, should have won that seat, but actually Labour did do much better than people predicted. So Theresa May's parting shot, she leaves a divided country, she leaves a divided parliament, she leaves a divided, her own party, and she leaves her party in an existential crisis right now. They are polling so low that senior members of her own party fear that the party may never, ever recover from where they are right now. So she has been an unmitigated disaster.
Here's the latest polling. Brexit Party, if there was a general election, would be way out in front, more than a quarter of the vote, with Labour, Lib Dems, and as Aisha says, Conservatives coming in behind, and that's because the Brexit Party would take more Conservative votes than Labour votes.
Yeah, and the one thing that the Conservatives have to realise here is to, not repeat the mistake that Theresa May made of taking a poison chalice and making unwise promises on the back of that were undeliverable, which is what has taken us now to this point. I think whoever comes in as Conservative leader ought to, I'm not saying they will, ought to look at people and say clearly and honestly, we're not going to solve this by October 31st. Crashing out with no deal is not good for us. This will take more time. And the only thing that will get the Brexit Party votes back into the Conservative tent are if Brexit happens. But if it happens in a way that's very harsh on a lot of the country, they might not come back. They might go to other parties. So they have to get this done, but they have to level up with the British people, something that hasn't been done. But this is where you have to kind of learn your recent history and say, I'm not going to repeat that foundational error that Theresa May made.
They're already doing it.
And be, whether it's Michael Gove or Jeremy Hunt, saying, look, no, it's going to be harder than this, and we have to face up to it.
They've killed their campaigns by saying that.
What this is showing is the tribalisation, deep tribalisation of British politics.
Not along party lines.
No, it's very tribal. It's much more so than American. And so now these things are sort of laid bare. We're also looking at the fact that we are now leaving a vote situation into an existential situation in which leave the electoral process and actually become stances in the political landscape. Leave is about what you feel about the country. Remain is about what you feel about the country. The problem with the legacy parties, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, is that they're operating in a trope in which it's about votes. This is deeper than that. And why the Remain Party is out there. The Remain Party is a pressure group. It's not a party. It got elected as a political party. It has MEPs. But it is the embodiment of the feeling that people feel right now about Brexit and what leave means. And unfortunately, we don't have the leadership on the left in which someone can stand up and say, basically, I know what this is about.
Aisha, these are the favourites for the next leader of the Conservative Party who will automatically become Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, way out in front.
Yeah.
They've all committed to leaving the European Union. It's just about the timing, right?
Yeah.
The terms of that.
Absolutely.
So does the Conservative Party become a Leave party when this person takes over?
Well, I think that's what the hope is. The candidate, the selectorate, remember, they are predominantly white, more affluent, slightly older sort of selectorate. There'll be about just over 100,000 people that take that decision. They are absolutely looking for somebody who is not just going to sort of talk about being a Brexiteer, but actually walk like a Brexiteer. They want somebody who is absolutely not just kind of prepared to walk away at the last, hurdle. Right now, saying in a very muscular way, we are leaving the EU without a deal. So that is why I think the front two runners will be, it absolutely is Boris Johnson. And, he is somebody who...
And Michael Gove?
Michael Gove, I don't think so as much, because he did come out last weekend and said, look, I think a no deal would be really, really bad. I think we might have to delay Brexit. That has actually killed his campaign. The selectorate, remember, this is not about the public. This is about a group of 100,000 people who are insanely keen and frustrated about Brexit.
Absolutely.
They want a hard Brexit. And the way the lines, I mean, Bonnie is right in many ways. I don't think tribal politics is over for the Labour and the Conservative Party. I spend a lot of time door-knocking. I mean, I'm going up to Scotland to this weekend to do some political work up there. Remember, the red-blue thing is still quite, strong for a lot of people. I was really surprised, actually, in Peterborough about how the Labour vote held up, because Labour has had a lot of scandal. They've got an anti-Semitism scandal going on right now. The last MP ended up in the clink, with a huge kind of scandal. Jeremy Corbyn is not polling well as a leader. They just got really massacred at the Conservative, at the
So you were quite
elections.
emboldened as a Labour member?
I think Jeremy Corbyn's team are going to think, punching the air, this means that we are... for them to win in a Leave seat, 61%, that does show you that the Leave-Remain divide is perhaps not as stark as we might have been thinking it is.
That's what I mean by
But
the tribal
I think
thing.
the Brexit and Conservative vote adds up a lot more neatly than, say, Labour and Liberal Democrat would in that seat, though. I think if the Tories get their act together and actually get Brexit through, I think a lot of their problems go away. And this is about how you order those audiences you're talking about. Right now, they're bidding amongst MPs to get on a ballot. Then it's out to 100,000 people. But they should be thinking about what can I get through Parliament and what can I get past the country.
Andrew, they're not doing that. I mean, I've been speaking to so many Conservatives. The key thing is now...
I don't think they are.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
they should be.
There should be, and then there's the real politics of where we are. Make no mistake, the fault line in politics about... Forget a deal. If there's a second referendum, if there's another general election, the fault line is going to be this. Either stay in the EU and revoke Article 50 or go for a hard Brexit.
100% correct. And the British people right now are looking for theatre. They have absolutely lost faith in the political process. It's dead. It's dead as far as most people are concerned. And I don't care what part of the spectrum you're on, they're looking for theatre. And the theatre is Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson will betray the Conservatives. A lot of people feel that. Boris will come in, he'll talk about a hard Brexit. If it's too ugly, he'll move. His family is Remain. So this guy is as untrustworthy, slippery and devious as he always has been, matched up with Nigel Farage, who's basically a shill. And Nigel Farage, and we've got a shill, and we've got a slippery customer. That's British politics, and the British people are looking for redemption.
Well, this is your worst possible soundbite. It's Farage talking about Boris.
Boris twice voted against Mrs May's treaty, the one she signed with Mr Barnier from the European Commission, said it was an awful deal, it would reduce us to a slave state. The third time it came back to the House of Commons, guess what? He voted for it. So I don't know what Boris believes in.
But is there any appetite in Parliament for a no-deal Brexit?
In the country there is, and if Parliament doesn't get that, the Brexit Party will get stronger still. That's why the Brexit Party is growing in strength. Parliament is out of touch with the people.
Wrong question. The question should have been, how much of an appetite is there for a no-deal Brexit? Of course there's an appetite for a no-deal Brexit. How much is there? And that's an example to me of how the phenomenon, I put it in quotes, of Nigel Farage is created in this country a lot of times by the news media. And he was created, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, by the BBC, and now he's in the point where he's created this thing called the Brexit Party. Actually could make a competition in Peterborough with a legitimate political party. That's what's scary, not what actually happened.
But on the BBC point, this should be about the BBC, but the criticism from Farage's side is the BBC hasn't supported them, so, you know, it goes
Oh,
round
look,
in circles.
the BBC knows it's doing the right thing when everybody criticises them. People like Bonnie will criticise them, Andrew Donis criticise them, sometimes I criticise them, then the other side, Farage criticise them. When both Leavers and Remainers are calling for the BBC to be scrapped, they're probably in the right place.
I didn't call for it to be scrapped.
I know, but you know what I mean? No, but you know what I mean? There's so much heat around BBC. But the key point is, this Brexit thing is now, it's not a question of fact, it's a question of faith, right? People are so polarised on either side of it. But the other thing that I've really picked up, I was in Peterborough yesterday. In fact, I was there, I got home at 5 o'clock this morning. I was at the Count. I was talking to people in Peterborough. And what was really fascinating is both Leavers and Remainers said to me, we've just got to get out now. I'm sick of this, and out means a proper out. None of this faffing around with the deal, proper out. We want proper out. I want the Nigel Farage.
Do you have sympathy for that?
Do you know, it was actually very useful for me getting out of the London bubble and going to sort of talk to people. And actually one guy, by the way, had just said to me that his small business had folded in the last couple of months because of all the uncertainty. But I think there is a fatigue out there with people, and they want it resolved one way or the other. There is a lot of feeling as well. But look, either we stay in or we just go out properly. I think the mistake that I think a lot of politicians have tried to do is to constantly plead with the public that there's some kind of middle way through this, the pragmatic, compromise a little bit here, give a little bit here. That's not where the mood is. The mood is really, really raw.
But the Parliament's responsibility is not to reflect mood. The Parliament's responsibility is to understand the situation, understand the people's mood, do what's best for the country. People are exhausted. I'm exhausted. I'm a staunch Remainer. I am exhausted. But the Parliament has got to be able to do a long-term look at this thing, and they're stuck.
But it's not going to get resolved until it goes out to the people. And I'm afraid the choices. But there are some people on our Remain side who say you can only have on the ballot paper if there was a second referendum, May's deal or Remain. And I don't think that would actually be fair to the British public. I think you've got to have this out, right? This is like this big row that is brewing and hanging over us, and we've got to have this out. We have to either
this is where I think the Conservative Party and the government has to... The important acronym now is the DUP, and the important date is 2022. That's when the government has to change hands and go to the polls, and the DUP is what's keeping this government in. And I think it's one of those perverse things where you look at it, and the Conservative Party, if they're going to get out on Brexit in a way that doesn't damage the country before they go to the general election, they're going to have to get the DUP on board again.
Election might come on much earlier. That might be a much
this is why they need.
Andrew, Brexit is the Conservative Party. We are inside the Conservative Party. This country, this country has been arguing about Europe since at least 1990, and that's how long I've been here. It's always, at the end, every Prime Minister has had to go or be whatever because
if you're looking at the
Europe.
proximate challenge now, it's confidence of the House of Commons, and you have enough people saying in the Conservative Party, if you try to ram no deal through or try to prorogue, we will vote the government down and go to the poll and be decimated.
No, but if that happens, right, this is what... So if Boris Johnson, Prime Minister Boris Johnson tries to force it through a no-deal Brexit, and some of his party join with Jeremy Corbyn and force a general election, what Boris Johnson, I think, is likely to do is say, right, OK, let's make this a really clear fault line. We, the Conservative Party, are going to back a WTO Brexit, a hard Brexit. That will bring in a lot of the Brexit Party supporters. Goodness knows what Labour's position will be on this, by the way. We'll still be fighting
force them to make a...
Exactly, and that will make the fault line. And there is a chance, I hope this doesn't happen, because I think this would be a disaster for the country, there is a chance the Conservative Party could get their majority.
Which is a reason then for Labour to stay in.
But don't
until 2022.
Don't rule out the trickiness of Boris Johnson in that he may make the mistake that David Cameron tried to make. He wants to go for Nigel Farage and obliterate Nigel Farage. If he tries to go for Nigel Farage, which is a possibility, we don't know where Boris will fall. If the wind shifts, Boris will go with the wind. He's always done that before, and he'll do it again.
We'll be back in a moment. Hazel says, I wonder if through her resignation, the country will become less divided.
No,
we doubt it.
Very much
We're doubting it. We do want to believe that, don't we?
We do, but I just feel that this country is... I mean, I've worked in politics for 20 years, OK, and I have never seen anything like I've kind of witnessed now. But when I look back at my time, you know, from starting to work... I started working in politics in 1997 when Tony Blair got elected. And so I've seen it, you know, from every single vantage point. I've had like a ringside seat. And I think a lot of where we are now, it's awful, but a lot of this stuff has been stored up for a long, long time from, not investing enough in outside London, the regions and nations of this country, the global financial crash where basically it was still business as usual and the bankers carried on. You know, we all saw The Big Short and basically that's sort of true. MP's expenses scandal when people really lost trust in the political class and the political class never regained it as well. And also a kind of failure to talk about some of the grievances that people outside London and did have. And so there's this kind of perfect...
Particularly on immigration.
And other things as well in terms of public investment in their communities as well, and things like low pay and poverty pay and all that kind of thing. So we've had this, and you've had a political class which has just been quite elite. Like all politicians have looked the same, sounded the same. You couldn't really tell one from the difference. So it's not like this has just happened out of nowhere. This has been visited on us from, I'd say decades, 20, 30
25 years.
Yeah, so it's going to take a long time to heal.
Yeah.
It's not going to be fixed.
Theresa May quitting as Tory leader. She'll stay on for now as Prime Minister. Where's British politics heading? We'll miss the shoes, presumably, will we? These are the shoes she's very famous for, which the Times have referenced in a cartoon today, featuring Boris and Gove. He's another front runner, and he's famous for backstabbing.
I started the I started the I started the hashtag Stop Gove. Just as a general thing you should do in life is Stop Gove. One of the big problems, I think, to go back to what Aisha was saying, is that what I've noticed, my first time voting was 97 for the Labour Party. I became a citizen to vote for the Labour Party. I'm outing myself. And I'm saying that the lack of intellectual heft in this country has gone down to a level where it is minuscule. We don't have anyone in politics who can actually talk about a vision of this country, about what the country could possibly be. They just are short-term, and they're talking about issues. An issue is not a vision. And a slogan is not a vision, which is what the Labour Party gives you. Lots and lots and lots of slogans. There is no vision. And I think people are desperate for vision, no matter what, as we say in America, the vision thing, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on, we don't have it.
We're talking about the fatigue a bit. It's interesting when you look at the front pages today, it's a huge day in British politics, but they're all focusing on D-Day. Do you think that speaks to the fatigue?
Thankfully, we have our priorities in order.
Yeah.
Like, 75 years ago, my grandfather was on Juno Beach fighting for all the things that we're worried about now. And so it's great that we can take time out and actually behave like adults and all do the right thing. And the Prime Minister spoke beautifully on behalf of the veterans in the country. Trump did the same, if you can believe that. Justin Trudeau did the same thing. And it's right and proper that we honor our veterans and not be partisan about it. And remember, when the stakes were such that young men would pick up a rifle and young women would join the service, Her Majesty included, to fight on behalf of their country. And I think part of what Bonnie's saying, when I hear you speak about that timeline, is that it also dovetails nicely with how the media has accelerated.
Exactly.
Online conversations have accelerated. It is just so loud and busy. If you're not bold, direct, and nonsensical, and kind of always constantly hammering your message, you get lost. There is no time to sit back and go, well, let's have a think about this, or can I be a moderate and say maybe we take a bit of this and a bit of that? It feels harder to have those moments.
I think one of the problems, and I'm from a sort of moderate tradition, but I think the reason why people are so frustrated about that is that they felt all the compromise was done in a way which kind of perpetuated the economic status quo. So all the compromises kept big business and the wealthy in pretty good nick, and it was the people at the bottom that really got hammered. So if you look at what happened in the coalition years, very unusual in this country to have a coalition, they introduced really strident cuts across the country, which have really visited poorer communities, particularly in the north, and affected things like adult social care, so looking after kind of older people and vulnerable people. They hit things like the bedroom tax, which is a very, very unfair, regressive tax on some of the poorest people. The Liberal Democrats said that they were going to cancel tuition trees. They trebled them. So remember, for a lot of people out there, they have just reached boiling point in terms of all the inequality they have faced in their lives. And that's why they're thirsting something different.
But this goes back again to what Andrew just said. This country's never been fair. When has it ever been fair? The difference is now that people can say it, and they can say it quickly, and they can say it immediately, and they can say it and get a reaction. And that's the media. The other part of it, too, is these front pages reflect not only D-Day and these heroes, but the mythos of this country. This country flees to an idea of World War II every time. And this is comforting to people. This is about, you can project on this gentleman, the veteran, and imagine all kinds of things.
The boy wearing his
want.
grandfather's medals.
That is comforting to the British, because World War II becomes a mythological place where they can flee, where somehow things were cut and dried and black and white, and we can figure it out. We don't have the leadership to actually tell people what is going on right now, and that's why...
I think it's because we haven't had that conversation about the whole issue of things like globalization, in which people like us and the political class have done quite well out of that settlement. There's more opportunities for us, more chances to talk.
There is a conversation about it.
We haven't had the conversation.
But Andrew, I would push back against that, right? Again, as somebody who's
made my point.
Just on that point of immigration, everyone says this all the time. Oh, and we've never talked about immigration. You look at the front page newspapers of the dominant newspapers in our market. For 20 years, they've been raging about how terrible immigrants are, how they're coming here, stealing all your jobs, sponging off the NHS, even though the NHS is staffed by people from the Commonwealth, like my father that came over all these years ago. And the other thing, remember, Britain is now a much more mixed society. And when you have, just last year, and this is another part of Theresa May's toxic legacy, the Windrush scandal, where she created such a hostile environment for immigrants, go-home vans.
This was as Home Secretary.
She was
This is Home Secretary. And that has coloured the direction of travel of Brexit. So for a lot of people, they don't feel invested in wanting to be sort of moderate right now, because they feel really marginalised in our society.
These are the posters you're referring to. This is Home Secretary, go home or face arrest.
No, because no one has had that conversation about this is what immigration brings to the country. This is why it's good.
Is no
Here are some of the downsides about it. If you're lower on the income scale, a lot of immigration does put downward pressure on your wages.
No space for it.
But you have to have a conversation
So
about
the
that.
country
Like, what's the right level?
Hold on.
How do we achieve
Bonnie for
that
Prime
level?
Minister, says Heidi. What do you think of that?
Well, you know what?
Your £5 is in the
We're going to listen to your favourite person in the meantime, then I'll get you to respond. It's Donald Trump talking about the potential front runners to replace Theresa May.
Oh, my God, please.
So I know Boris. I like him. I've liked him for a long time. I think he'd do a very good job. I know Jeremy. I think he'd do a very good job. I don't know Michael. But would he do a good job, Jeremy? Tell me.
Max, he took a picture with Michael Gove.
Michael Gove, he did an interview with
He
Michael
took a picture with Michael Gove. See, the problem is, again, to go back to the theater aspect of it, we're going to have two clowns running this country, and people really need to face that. We've got Boris Johnson, and we're going to have Nigel Farage, and that's where we're going to be caught in between.
You can throw Jeremy Corbyn into that equation.
There's a tweet.
No, I wouldn't. Jeremy's not a clown.
The Brexit Party
He's not a clown.
Brexit Party tweeted referencing that Nigel Farage should be involved in the Brexit negotiations with the European Union. Obviously, something that Conservatives are fighting in a massive way. But Donald Trump supported that proposition as well, didn't he, when he was over?
Well, I don't think it's because he thought seriously about it. I think it's because Nigel Farage came over and gave him a hug after he got the tape scandal towards the end of the U.S. election, where he was grabbing females by the nether regions, and Nigel Farage came over and gave him a hug and said it's all right. That's why he likes Nigel Farage, not because he buys into some grand vision that Nigel Farage is going to deliver something the British government has not been able to deliver. And all of this is a distraction from the hard work that has to be done. And any Tory leadership candidate that's telling people it's going to be easy is lying.
But everyone is lying.
that's
That's
what
but
people
that is the climate that we're in.
That's right.
And I'm afraid that, you mark my words, I had, Bonnie's prediction that maybe Boris will swing and, be a bit softer on Brexit. I actually heard that. I've written a column about it today. I met with some young Tory advisors who were hoping against hope that Boris is going to be some secret moderate and then sort of win power and then do a U-turn on Brexit. That ain't going to happen because he is the poster boy of Brexit. Brexit has given him his platform, which is this howl of betrayal. He is the poster boy for a hard Brexit. But hang on, let me finish. And the idea that he's suddenly going to do a U-turn on that is for
Didn't say that.
But hang on. The key thing is, we're in a culture war right now. And you are right. That thing about the locker room bans, I remember when it came out and a lot of people were like, oh, Trump is never going to win off the back of that. Hillary Clinton is going to romp through. I was like, no.
Isha.
A lot of people love the fact that there are these strong men in politics, very unsavoury characters. They are charlatans, they are spivs. A lot of people out there like that. We are in an era of the strong man.
And you just made my point. Boris Johnson can give a fig about Brexit. He could care less. What he cares about is being the Prime Minister. If it looks like he can actually blindside his enemies, he will do a U-turn. He did it in London as our mayor. Remember, Boris went through all kinds of different shenanigans. No, they called him Clown Hall. I mean, basically, we don't know.
But Brexit is bigger than that. Brexit is bigger than these small issues like the Garden Bridge.
Is not to be trusted.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments around the desk. Sosa on Facebook says Theresa May's legacy was toxic. I'm just going to keep talking.
Don't hope against.
Aurora says Prime Minister May did her job well. Continue the conversation on our Facebook feed.